Thank you everyone so much for joining this afternoon. My name is Megan Riley, and I am the Education and Outreach Associate for the North American Marine Environment Protection Association. I want to welcome you all today to our NAMEPA MARPOL webinar series on ship salvage and ship recycling. Some quick housekeeping rules before we dive into our fantastic panel, meeting our panel and learning a bit more about NAMEPA. I do ask that you turn off your microphones and your cameras so that the spotlight can be on our fantastic panelists. We will have time for a Q&A session at the end of the panel. So if you do have any questions, sit tight and just post it into the chat and we will get to them at the end. If it is super pressing, this is being recorded and it will be posted to our website and our YouTube channel in a couple of days after this. So first of all, I would like to say thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We are the North American Marine Environment Protection Association, and our mission is preserving the marine environment by promoting sustainable maritime industry best practices and educating the public on saving our seas. Now, the person who can talk the best about this wonderful organization is Carleen Leiden-Walker, who is on the call. So Carleen, I'm going to turn it over to you quickly to talk about NAMEPA.
Well, I'm excited about this NAMEPA MARPOL series, and thank you very much, Megan, for spearheading it. I founded NAMEPA 16 years ago, and I was accused of being a salty tree hugger. And it's amazing how the world has changed since NAMEPA has come into being, because the adoption and the recognition of our mission and the importance of what we're doing, not only for industry, which we support regularly with programs such as this, with educational materials, with events. Our next one's going to be in Houston, gentlemen, so we look forward to seeing you there. But we also work hard on sustainability issues, which are confronting the industry and the public at large. And we have an ESG program that we're very proud of. Our Maritime Sustainability Passport is the reward if you can achieve our levels of competence and compliance with ESG principles. And the other area that we work hard on is educating the public and students to save our seas. And that's become increasingly important for our industry as it relates to workforce development. And to that end, we run MIPSIC, which is the Maritime Primary and Secondary Education Coalition. And that is a force for developing the workforce. And we reach about 200 schools and educate them about the value proposition of the industry and the careers that are available within our industry. I don't know if you're all aware, but at least on the U.S. flag side, we're 5,000 mariners short. The Coast Guard is 3,500 mariners short, and they've had to stand down some of their cutters because of that shortfall. Globally, we're expected to be 96,000 mariners short by 2026. So it's in all of our best interest to support the work of building the future workforce so that we can sustain our levels of competence and integrity when it comes to ship operations. So as this slide says, industry best practices, educating the public, and promoting the value proposition of the commercial maritime industry. And I did not do that in one breath. I'm sorry, Megan, I disappointed you.
That's okay. Beautifully said. Thank you very much, Carleen.
But I do want to just get back to one thing, and that is how happy I am that we've had, this is the last in our 2023 MARPOL webinar series. And as you may know, this was the 50th anniversary of MARPOL. And I'm an IMO Maritime Ambassador, and I was at IMO in September for World Maritime Day, and they were delighted that we were giving visibility to these important issues and recognizing that even though it's 50 years, there are still MARPOL violations, and there are a lot of other technical aspects related to ship operations, which we'll be addressing today, that we need to raise the light and the visibility of. So they're really pleased with this series, and I'm sure at the end of this, Megan's going to tell us what we can look forward to in 2024. So thank you for the floor, Megan. I'm going to turn off now.
Thank you very much, Carleen. Well, now we get the chance to meet our panelists this afternoon. So we are joined with Ezequiel, who is our commercial manager with SMIT Salvage Americas. He studied industrial engineering in the Buenos Aires, Argentina, and began his career in telecommunications and consulting. He's been involved in most salvage cases across Argentina for the past 10 years, during which he collaborated with international salvers, joining SMIT Salvage as a commercial manager in 2021, and has been relocated to the Houston office where he oversees the Americas region. So Ezequiel, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks for having us.
And our second panelist, we have Zach, who is the naval architect and project manager with SMIT Salvage Americas. He graduated from the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in 1996 and began his Coast Guard career as an engineer on board the icebreaker Polar Seas before moving to the Coast Guard's Marine Safety Program. During his tour at the Marine Safety Center, Zach was a member of the Coast Guard Salvage Engineering Response Team and assisted in all captains of the U.S. Port Engineering Assessment and monitoring of marine casualties and salvage operations. He has involvement with the Commercial Marine Salvage and Emergency Response, which began with Bismo Marine and TNT Marine Salvage, and later with Ardent, and now with SMIT Salvage in Houston. Between his time with TNT and Ardent, Zach worked for 6 years in the oil and gas industry in offshore fixed platform installation and decommissioning with Tetra Technologies and the wireless light well intervention of FMC. Zach, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick. All right, so we're going to jump right into our questions that we have this afternoon. So my first one can go to either one of you, but what is the role of SMIT within the maritime industry? Some people may not know what SMIT does or how they are involved. So what does SMIT Salvage actually do? And Ezekiel, why don't we start with you?
Well, SMIT Salvage is a company with over 180 years of experience in salvage. Sometimes I've heard people think of salvage and associate SMIT as synonymous with that. But right now, in the current stage, I think we like to phrase it like we are problem solvers for the maritime industry. Salvage sometimes tends to pigeonhole you into what people have a predisposition for thinking salvage is. And the reality is that right now we are faced with a whole different spectrum of situations that we need to intervene and assist. Hence the problem-solving model that we like to apply to ourselves. And second of all, I think right now we are partners to pretty much every single stakeholder in the maritime industry, mainly owners, underwriters, and we have been working a lot with trying to change that perspective, and it's a faulty one at that, I believe, about the salvor being the person you engage when something already happened. There's a joke that we are the pirates of the modern age, right? And here we are when you have a problem, and here we come to make money out of it. And I actually believe that we are not your enemy. Actually, I like to compare ourselves more with doctors than actually pirates. We're here to help you when you have a problem, and fair enough, we do want to be reasonably paid for it, but I think we've changed the perspective into more preemptive than proactive, or reactive, sorry, more proactive than reactive. And that applies to everything we do right now.
Wonderful. Zach, do you have anything to add?
Well, Ezekiel's got the main point there, of course. We are problem solvers for our clients and for other stakeholders when it comes to maritime industry. You know, we're most associated as being the emergency responders in the marine environment, which is certainly true. That is what we do. It's our core business. But we also find ourselves engaged with clients in a different fashion. So our role in the maritime industry, we're starting to break the mold, if you will, of what a typical salver has done in the past. We are, in fact, problem solvers. You know, if you look at the complexities in the oil and gas market, in particular, and the technologies that are being deployed, it's requiring a new thought process and a development of new equipment and techniques in order to respond to these type of casualties and incidents that are occurring nowadays. So Ezekiel's right. It requires a fundamental of problem solving in-house capability to manage expectations of our clients, and then of course the other stakeholders.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now, Zach, what is the process for ship salvage, and what are some regulations that are currently in place regards with that?
Yeah, of course, it depends on where you are in the world.
Yes.
You know, those of us that are joining this call here from the U.S. are probably all familiar with the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, which is one of the driving regulations as it becomes to, you know, not only preventing, pollution releases into the marine environment, but of course then managing the responses to those type of incidents or potential incidents. So Coast Guard regulations related to OPA 90 take a big part of that. Of course, you have the international regulations promulgated by IMO, which also there, but there are some regional flavors, if you will, depending upon where you are in the world. And so there's obviously some governments that take a more proactive role in engagement in managing salvage responses in their waters. So, but here I'm sure we're all more familiar with OPA 90 in short. And OPA 90, but over a decade ago, then did actually also promulgate what is now known as salvage and marine firefighting regulations, would actually put a requirement on vessel owners and operators trading to the United States to have pre-negotiated contracts with companies like SMIT to be able to respond on their behalf when they find themselves in an unfortunate situation that requires some assistance.
Now, Ezequiel, you worked a lot within Argentina. How are the regulations different, and what regulations are you seeing down there as well?
Oh, I was smiling a little bit because Zach is on point with regards to how different the perception of salvage and the regulations in place. And Argentina is a very good example in my perspective to discuss a little bit of what I consider an overly bureaucratic, protectionist kind of framework for salvage. But SMIT as a global salvage provider, we need to be as aware as we can and learn our lessons by working pretty much in every country in the world. The intricacies that these imply, and some tend to have similarities. It doesn't matter if you're in Asia, Europe, or even in the Americas, whereas some are very open and allow you, for example, to bring foreigners to do work, especially under the umbrella of specialist people. But if you ask about Argentina, for example, you as a foreign company, you need to be registered with the authorities as a salvage company. So us as an international one, we need to have the right network of partners around the world that fulfill these requirements. When you're not able to, you can't be registered in every single country around the world. But it is interesting, though I do tip my hat off to the OPA 90 regulation as, at least from my international perspective, pretty much spearheading the concept of the prearranged contractual framework and having all the tedious conversations, let's say, well beforehand, because you do not want to have those conversations when something bad is happening. That's the reality.
Yes, thank you. Now, Ezequiel, many people don't know or don't fully understand the in-depth process of ship salvage. And what can you do or talk about within what ship salvage is, kind of the process of it?
I think a good place to start would be with the traditional separation of the two bigger concepts of salvage. Before they used to be called wet and dry salvage. Now the polite way to call it is emergency response and wreck removal. In broad terms, you have situations where you need to respond to an ongoing emergency to try to prevent something worse of happening. And then you have the other scenario where pretty much the worst case has happened, either the ship has sunk or everything, and then you go through the wreck removal kind of situation. And those entail very different scenarios. I will speak from the commercial perspective mainly. They are extremely different. Wreck removals tend to have the time factor, which is not necessarily as constrictive as an emergency response. And there's very good and specific contracts for both. How to generate awareness is a extremely good question that I don't have actually the right answer. I think we're all struggling to it because even within shipping and the maritime community, sometimes people do not perceive as what salvage is. But again, it is just such a broad spectrum of situations. It can be a ship on fire in the middle of the ocean, and we need to be there and assist you. And it can be a rig that's already sunk and for 10 years, and we need to remove it. And that's pretty much what we do. We solve your problems.
Wonderful. Now, Zach, what do you think companies can do to be more engaged with the public or educate about this important process?
The public engagement when it comes to salvage is varied, right? And I'm certain you would get a different experience, obviously, with salvage in, let's say, United States, Australia, UK, where you have a public who are, for the most part, concerned with these issues, are proactive in their engagement with these issues, and so they're more inclined to engage with NGOs or the type of organizations where they have a bit more of a say or influence into how operations may be planned or conducted. So, every salvage company, I think, takes a different approach to this. One, which I think all the salvers are embracing at this point, is yeah, you have to be transparent with the public. Of course, we're transparent with our stakeholders, with our client. But gone are the days where you just kind of do things because that's the way you want to do them, or that's the way they'll have always done. There's a bit of education. There is a bit of essentially a presentation of your scope, a presentation of your technique, of your methods, that is appropriate to make to the public when you do these things. Now, I mean, there's some devil in the detail for regardless of reasons. Let's just say that you're doing a salvage response and it's an issue of national security. So there could be some restrictions in your ability to be fully transparent with the public. But I don't think there's the fear with public transparency as there used to be in the past.
Wonderful. Now, I understand SMIT is a salvage company, but can you talk a little bit on the process of recycling and kind of how you guys are involved with recycling? I know, Zach, we had talked about, you had worked with the U.S.
Yep.
Navy in a recycling process.
Sure. So SMIT has the pleasure of being one of the U.S. Navy's contracted emergency responders, and so we work with the Navy on a fairly regular basis, even today, in fact. But I'll just reference one case that may be familiar to some of you, which is the USS Bonhomme Richard fire in San Diego a couple of years ago. An aircraft carrier, which unfortunately caught fire during a maintenance availability, and it deemed that the Navy could not repair her, and so the Navy's then at a decision point to look at what options they are for disposal of the ship. And in this case, the Navy has options that the general public isn't necessarily available to, which is scuttling the ship or using it for testing purposes and the like. But the Navy decided in this point to scrap and recycle it. And so we're lucky in the U.S. to have a couple of shipbreakers, recyclers, I think is the more appropriate term now, that will environmentally manage the disposal of ships in their entirety. And so through the whole process of actually fighting this fire and getting it ready for decommissioning and disposal, SMIT worked with the Navy and their chosen contractor to do the recycling in Brownsville, Texas. And so salvers don't necessarily manage the entire recycling process, but we're engaged usually. We're a stakeholder in that process, and sometimes we facilitate that process in the sense of we get the vessel in whatever damage condition it may be into a condition where it's suitable for either transport or for towage or ultimate delivery to the scrapper. And even this is happening just globally as well. So we were recently involved with ExxonMobil, oil and gas major. Everyone knows the name. And they had an FPSO that required decommissioning. And it unfortunately suffered some damage. And so it needed to be essentially transported. And there again, ExxonMobil, they have a brand that they're concerned with. They looked at their options and says, "Yep, okay, we're going to go with a reputable, approved ship recycler. SMIT, come help us figure out how we can get it from point A to point B." And that's one of the means in which we get engaged with them.
Wonderful. Thank you. Ezequiel, do you have anything to add from your side on recycling?
Oh, perhaps what Zach touched upon at the end. It always all depends on perhaps who your client is sometimes, but we are noticing that there's this trend of we're all becoming more environmentally aware, and big companies also have to show their actions on their policies, and we do see, especially oil and gas majors, they do present to us their problems, and they're not looking for just any solution. They're looking for a proper green solution or as green as they can be. And in recognition, it is at their expense. That is also something to highlight. It does tend to be more expensive, but they are fulfilling what they say, and they're taking the steps to do it as best as possible. I have someone tell me once, ships tend to either sink or be scrapped. And now it comes to the approach that both scenarios, even though you're talking about recycling per se, even for scuttling, you take the measures beforehand, and it's not like 50 years ago where you could do certain things that perhaps would be frowned upon. Exxon, I think, is the best example, that they took the ship to be properly recycled at a very recognizable green recycling facility in Denmark, correct? So we're seeing these places pop up more and more.
And Carlene mentioned earlier that the Hong Kong Convention was coming into effect, right?
Yeah,
But earlier this year, when ExxonMobil was responding to their incident, they essentially looked at the Hong Kong Convention and what those requirements were going to be once they were enforced. And that's what they considered. That was the basis of their evaluation, were the aspects of the Hong Kong Convention. And so, one of the elements of the convention was to do essentially a hazardous substance survey of the vessel. Such a survey had not been done on the vessel. It had been that this asset had been in operation for decades, and so so part of the process of readying the vessel for transport to recyclers was in fact engaging with a company who would do such a survey to fully assess the vessel for the presence of hazardous substances, to get a mitigation plan for those substances, either for those that had to be removed before it could be transported, or for substances that would then ultimately be removed by the recycler. But was not a requirement on their part to do this, but they certainly opted to go ahead and apply that in full before commencing with the recycling. So it certainly does have the attention of responsible owners and operators, for sure.
It's good that responsible spotlight is being shown. Now, Ezequiel, you had talked about a ship or an oil rig that had sunk and been underwater for 10 years. Does the deterioration of a ship kind of change your process of salvage or how you kind of look at that case?
Short answer, yes. Long answer now. I do believe, and again, I will try to provide the commercial approach to it. I think a better example is actually an emergency response situation where deterioration is happening faster, where things are usually planned on the spot. One of the key highlights is have the proper contractual, let's say, or the proper contract, to be honest, that can tolerate the changes in a rapidly deteriorating situation. When you engage a salvor, you probably get presented with different scenarios or different contractual way forwards. We tend to have our opinion of which is the best for different situations. But if we want to go for the infamous, at this stage, LOF, the Lloyd's Open Form, that is actually the most flexible contract you can have. When you mention a deteriorating situation, coming back to the proactive approach, you cannot say, okay, guys, let's stop and figure things out. You need to have the proper framework and the proper selection of salvor, of course, to respond to that deteriorating situation. Now, we can go into 10,000 different examples for each case, what is the actual response. But I think generally, and probably open the mic to Zach from the operations perspective, but as a commercial person, getting the right contractual framework is key for this.
Yeah, spot on, right? So I'm going to put my engineer's hat on now, and it's not unusual, right? It's a pretty actually common occurrence for there to be some change in condition of the vessel, be it from weather, from just age, and the general process is the phone rings, and you have a client that has an emergency or an incident somewhere. They're asking for help, but the amount of initial information is pretty limited. Commercially, you don't want to start spending money without making sure that you have some sort of agreement in place. So you get some initial framework on a commercial agreement. You start moving people and personnel and equipment. You get there and you start looking at things, and then you start scratching your head. Well, wow, this wasn't really kind of how we understood things to be. Or you find yourself in a situation to work on it, and again, you just as you work on the vessel itself, you see that there's elements, be it structural, be it operation of various ship systems that aren't fully functional, or we started fully functional and time or conditions or whatever, now they're not functional. These are common occurrences that a salvage just simply has to deal with. Of course, if the commercial flexibility is already there to make operational adjustments, then that just makes our lives easier. More often than not, we have to coordinate with our commercial team, and Ezequiel in this case, to be able to work with our client and financial interest who are paying for our services to make these type of adjustments. Because the situation always changes. I mean, that's why we're on this business, because it's not a routine work that we do. Every job is different. You come there with a fresh sheet, a fresh set of eyes, and quite often, the vessels are in a different condition than what was originally reported, and that's okay. That's a fact of life of how initial reports are being made, but it's quite common.
Yes, Carlene, I see your hands raised.
Sorry, gentlemen, but this is killing me, not
Okay.
being able to ask a question immediately. Following on this conversation, can you, it's my understanding you were part of the response in New York Harbor on the car carrier?
Correct.
Can you sort of walk us through step by step from when you got the call and, obviously not sensitive information, but can you describe to us what was the process resulting in your being involved in that salvage?
Yeah. Now, so just to note, the one disclaimer, it's all still under investigation, obviously, by Coast Guard and NTSB. So there'll be some sort of limit, Carlene, as to how much detail I can give you. But in a
Yes.
general sense, we were made aware of the fire on board. And fires are tricky in emergency responses. That a ship and its crew are trained to fight fires. There are the equipment on board, the firefighting systems, and they do have trained personnel. And so how it plays in most fire responses is that there is some period of time from which the fire originally starts that the crew tries to fight it themselves. Um, Sometimes you get into situations like the Grand Acosta Avorio, which is the incident you're referring to, where the fire gets beyond the capabilities of the ship's crew and its systems. And ultimately, that's at the point where we need to be engaged. I mean, obviously, we'd like to be there at the very beginning. Fires are just one of those type of casualties where time is absolutely of the essence. And so the earlier you respond, the better things usually are. And so there was this period of time where the fire happened. The crew tried to fight that fire. It grew beyond their capabilities, and so then we were mobilized and engaged and responded. And then, of course, you have local resources, the local fire departments, who also have jurisdiction because she was pier side, and so they had the capability to respond. They did. The Coast Guard actually just released a safety alert this week, I believe, noting that the need for ship-based marine firefighting training for
Yes.
for land-based firefighters, which I think is going to be a critical to leveraging the resources of local fire departments, because they have significant resources, capability, and experience. They simply lack shipboard knowledge of their systems and their arrangements and so forth that would make their participation safer. Right. So you have these various stakeholders and responders engaging. So our response as Marine Salvage, as our salvage and marine firefighting providers, was a little bit delayed. That's not unusual, and it's not necessarily unrealistic either, because there's so much going on. You have a captain who's sitting here getting information from left, right, and center. He's got all kinds of machines to feed his home office, the Coast Guard. And so it's easy to be overwhelmed with information input. There was a little bit of a delay, and I think the investigation will show, what the ultimate cause of that was. You know, the highlight is that once Salvage resources were there, we were able to attack the fire quickly, get boundary, then keep it from spreading. I guess ultimately, though, currently the critical point is trying to engage your professional resources as quickly as possible. It's there's usually no harm that will come to it. We can scale down as quickly as we scale up. You know, if it turns out that it's a non-emergency after all, no harm done. Thank you for letting us know. We got all of our stuff. We sent everything back home. But knowing and getting that initial phone call and that initial mobilization, more often than not, aids the response rather than detracts from it.
Okay, thank you for that. I'd also want to follow up with the initial reports assumed that it was a lithium battery fire, which it wasn't.
Right.
But that raises the issue of the changing cargoes and how Salvage has to adjust to these cargoes, because we saw, you know, the disaster, if you will. Was it the Cougar Ace that was filled with the Felicity Ace that was filled with lithium-ion batteries, and we've got to address those new challenges. And how are you moving towards that with technology and training?
Yeah, so good question, then, Carlene. So of course, it's on everybody's radar, the concerns and risks associated with lithium batteries. And SMIT has a couple of people dedicated out of our Department Direct Office who are looking into and engaging with specialists on new firefighting techniques and equipment to address lithium battery-based fires. It is a concern only because there's some sense in the general public that we're sort of starting from scratch here in our ability to effectively fight lithium fires. You know, there are techniques. They're not as effective as we'd like them to be. You know, we're accustomed to be able to be at the source of the fire and get it out fairly quickly, and that's not the case a lot of times with the lithium fires. And there's aspects of lithium-ion battery fires that you know, the heat associated with them and the rate at which that heat is expressed into the area around them, that sort of escalates the nature of the fire and the risks associated with the fire. So there's a lot of aspects to lithium fires that certainly are under our attention. We are actively engaged in research internally within SMIT, as well as our parent company, Piscalis, and then to other stakeholders as to how can we improve the techniques to get these, because they're not going to go away, obviously.
Ezequiel, do you have anything to add?
Oh, I actually no, or at least my point was what Zach touched upon at the end is, it is not only us as Salvage, we are the interested party for sure, because we face these dangerous situations, and so we are clearly interested in a solution and try to think of it as safely as we can. But we are jointly working with other stakeholders, insurance, for example. They have reached out to us, and we are developing procedures with them as well. Of course, perhaps the interest is different. They're trying to see if they can reduce claims or quote unquote save money. But at the end of the day, we're all here at the interest of a challenge that needs to be solved. And I think the community itself is coming together with these new developments. And it's not only lithium fire, I think, is the hot topic now, but we have alternative fuels. We have vessels that are getting bigger and bigger and bigger every single year. And as a salvage industry, we are noting that we are getting less cases. That is true, but cases are extremely complex right now, and we're all dreading this situation. What's going to happen when we have a huge LNG vessel that's on fire, for example, or those things can escalate so quickly. We can use the Safer, for example, the Safer in Yemen as a not necessarily complex situation, but a potential oil spill that could dwarf the Open 90, the Exxon Valdez scenario. And we do have to face these complexities together, all of us, all the interests, not only the Salvage, but yeah, like Zach, I just wanted to highlight that everyone's interested and invested in these things.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. I'll try to be quiet until the real Q&A session. Sorry. But I don't make promises.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it's a perfect segue into more of our environmental questions that I have. And so, how and why is salvage an environmental priority? And what are you guys doing at SMIT and salvage in general to protect the marine environment? I'm going to turn it over to Ezequiel first.
I like to say
Oh.
everything. We're all becoming more environmentally conscious, and it is not only now the self-imposed pressure from your own procedures and your own way of working, but now it's pretty much the public that will not tolerate something that is not environmentally sound and or that has the environment as an end goal to be protected. This has a lot of points. First of all, it has been recognized in the 1989 convention that the environment is something. Before it used to be you protect life, you protect goods and cargo and vessels and interests, but now we have the environment as pretty high up there after life. What we are doing, again, everything, but for example, I would like to highlight something. We are extremely good at removing oil of sunken ships. Even if you look at it from a financial perspective, removing oil from a ship will always be more efficient than controlling a spill, for example. So we have been trying to focus our efforts in the prevention part of environmental protection. Everything we do, we have several examples. I would like to highlight one in Mexico, for example, not more than a month ago. It was a grounded ship. Unfortunately, she grounded on an environmentally protected area on coral. Our whole procedure for refloating that vessel had to take the environment into consideration. If not, it would have been, let's say, we go and pull. This had to have all the necessary surveys done first, and the whole methodology for a refloat had to be done with the environment into consideration, and the damages, which were unfortunately there, were kept at a minimum. So yeah, I think everything we do now is focused on protecting the environment.
Wonderful. And Zach, how do you see that in your day-to-day operations as more the operational side?
Yeah, I mean, in salvage, we can't prevent the incident from happening, but once it does, I think we're the critical resource for many of our clients to either eliminate or mitigate any impact they have on the environment from whatever that incident may be. We are the first level responders for them, and you can categorize the possible types of. I mean, you don't have to do a lot of research to get a sense as to what kind of incidents can happen in the marine environment. What is common amongst all of them is that they are challenging incidents to respond to, because more often than not, you're on water, and water is a perfect medium to take all types of stuff and spread it around, right? Which is exactly what we don't want to do. And that's where our training and expertise comes in hand, in that we want to, we have a commercial interest to our client to protect their ship, their cargo. But with that also comes the protection of the environment. The more that I'm able to meet my client's interest in protecting their ship and their cargo, I'm also protecting the environment at the same time. But accidents do happen, and things do change, and so we come not only equipped to protect the equipment and cargo, but we come prepared with techniques and the ability to mitigate the impact to the environment once it does happen.
And how do you see ship recycling from an outside point of view, working with ship recycling, as you said, with the U.S. Navy? How do you see them protecting the marine environment?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think there's much in the way of a philosophical discussion, right? As to, is it better to scuttle the ship or is it better to recycle the ship? Well, maybe I should say that if I recycle the ship with a responsible recycler, sometimes one might argue that it might be better to scuttle the ship than to recycle in some other recycling companies who may not be so so responsible. Those do exist in the world. We all know them. But I think recycling. How can you argue against recycling? It is ultimately a commercial decision for a lot of our clients, though. There's no revenue when it comes to recycling, right? It's an end of life cost associated with their asset. And of course, the oil and gas industry has been sort of adjusting to that requirement as well. If you happen to remember the idle iron regulations that came out in the U.S. that I think are on pause now, but there was the expectation that owners of wells and subsea infrastructure that were no longer producing, hey, guys, you need to go and get your stuff out now. It's the same for owners of ships and other vessels. Like I said, there's no revenue, so it's commercially, how do they manage that obligation? Now, some will just simply make that decision on brand alone, and PR concerns. There are some that will make that decision simply because they feel that that's a responsible way to go. Others will be looking at more a commercial comparison, really, ultimately, as to how does it impact them on their bottom line, this decision versus sculling or recycling or choosing a responsible recycler versus another option.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn gears a little bit because we are just about out of time, but I wanted to talk about job opportunities. Where did you guys get your start? How did you get into this? Why ship salvage? What made you choose this career path? Ezequiel, I'm going to start with you. I know, big loaded question.
Well, we all have our own story to tell. I assume I had nothing to do with maritime. Perhaps a father that was involved in dredging some point in his life. I wasn't even born, so I don't even have family ties to the maritime industry. But I did have once a very, very interesting interview with what they told me was a salvage company, and this guy who was, now I learned, a salvage master, told me what they did, and I thought that is very, very cool. And what I like to say is that for everyone that's interested, salvage tends to be a one-way road. Once you're in it, either you leave screaming, thinking these guys are crazy, or you just love it. And I belong to that second group. How I started, it was just a friend that knew or worked for this company and introduced me. And again, I was just fell in love with it.
A good light bulb moment. Love it. And Zach, how did you get started? I know you went to the Coast Guard Academy, but how'd you kind of move over into salvage?
Yeah, I think I was doomed from the start, right? I mean, as soon as you get to sea, then you're like, well, I only want to stay at sea and do things that relate to shipping and and then my first emergency response for the Coast Guard. That was it. That's at the point. That's all I knew I wanted to do, and it's been off to the races since then.
Wonderful, Carlene, go ahead.
Oh, I'm not too impatient, am I? Just following up on what you guys said, which also references back to a conversation earlier in the webinar, which is how do we raise the awareness about the importance of the salvage industry and the exciting work you're doing? I mean, do we need to have a Netflix series? I mean, this is better than Indiana Jones. I mean, this is really exciting, compelling activity that you're doing. And then when you've got the ancillary benefits of also, saving assets, but saving the environment, to me, it's a natural. So who wants to take the first stab at writing the script?
I'm hearing Mike wrote Dirty Jobs Maritime Edition.
That is a fantastic idea, by the way, Megan. I like that a lot. We would love that, honestly, Carlene. It would be fantastic. Unfortunately, some of our clients don't like their worst days, publicized out, and which I also understand. But you're right to the point of awareness to this industry, to the salvage industry, to what it does for the community, for the marine industry. We are an important cog. We're maybe not the most important cog, but we are an important cog to make sure that this system, this machine keeps moving. No one ever plans for something bad to happen. No one expects that. We don't wake up this morning thinking I'm going to run my ship aground today, but these things do happen. And the world needs specialists to be able to manage those type of situations. And that's really what we want to do.
Okay. Yeah, I just think it's an exciting, gripping, fascinating tale and one that needs to be told. So we'll talk later about collaboration. Um, but the other question I had for you, and that comes on to, you were talking about the abandoned wells program.
Mhm.
But what happened to roulette?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think we need to bring roulette back to life. I mean, it's admirable that through good best practices, if you will, best operational practices, that the number of incidents are reducing. But we still have now 70-year-old World War II wrecks off of our shores. And
Right.
we'd gotten 10 years ago, we got about $1 million to prioritize them, but the list still exists. So I guess we need to talk to the Coast Guard about how to reactivate that program. And of course,
Well,
get
and
them
it's also
appropriated money.
NOAA as well, right? I mean, they've tried to coordinate funding and resources for going through some of their list as well. I do wonder if it's perhaps just a funding issue. I don't think it's a lack of concern or interest in doing so. I think everyone's struggling to find the funding to put resources toward it.
Well, I think the argument can be made that keeping the oil in the hull is the
Absolutely.
most cost-effective way.
Yeah.
And removing that oil safely and carefully is the most cost-effective way of remediating the wreck.
But keeping the oil in the hole is a near-term solution. As you look at this problem that goes forward with time, then it's not a long-term solution by any means.
No.
Right.
I've been taking it out responsibly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll try to be quiet again. Attempt.
Well, we have reached our panel at the end, so I'm going to have, are there any questions from anyone? Blaine, do you have another question you'd like to throw at him today?
Oh, I can always come up with something, but I actually took a breath to let other people dive in here. I want to talk a little bit about the recycling. You said that ExxonMobil took the ship up to Denmark,
Correct.
which sort of surprises me because that's, under EU's recycling rules. And now EU has just come out with new approvals on the handling of waste. So we're getting closer and closer to some of the recycling centers, as we like to call them now, in the sub-Indian continent, India, Bangladesh, etc., are becoming more acceptable because they're raising their standards, they're accommodating the Hong Kong Convention, etc. But why did ExxonMobil choose Denmark? That just sounds like an odd choice to me.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to engage them directly to get their answer. But I know one of the things they were considering, of course, they wanted certainty that the recycling was going to be done in a responsible fashion, and they felt that they were going to get that service from the recycling facility in Denmark.
Okay. Good to
Yeah.
know. Thank you.
It was very important to them. I can only express the number of hours in meetings where this was discussed in all seriousness, and so
Yeah.
they were not going to take any risk associated with the recycling of the asset with their name on it being done in an inappropriate
Certainly,
fashion.
it wasn't the best financially or economically. It for sure, they did get the offers from the other entities that you were mentioning, and they made a conscious decision to go that route.
Good on them.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions before we do a quick wrap up?
And before you tell us about 2024?
Yes, and our 2024 safety series. So I'm going to share my screen real quick again. You can also check back to our website for our 2024 webinar safety series. The